I made a video in the past about home remedies for heroin or opiate or opioid withdrawal, and I got a lot of negative feedback because I'm sorry, but there's no easy out. It's, like I did 18 months in solitary confinement for some crimes I don't really want to get into, and 8 months of which I spent in, solitary confinement. And after being to jail a dozen times and all the things, I have washed blood off my hands in the dark of night, strangers' blood. I have done horrible things to people. And all those things I've been through, including prison, are nothing compared to sobering up. That sobering up is easily the hardest thing I've ever done. And that there's just no easy way out. Suboxone and Subutex treatments are a trap that doctors have developed just to keep you coming back every 30 days. That's $700 a month for Suboxone, and you have to go to the doctors and you have to drug test. Well, what's the point of sobering up if you're doing the same shit you did when you were getting high on the real stuff? And that I got a lot of negative feedback from people because I didn't tell people, oh, it's going to be okay. It's super easy. Here's a way to sober up off of opiates where there's no pain. Hell, it's borderline euphoric, and that's just not the case. The longer you draw out this process, even if you're seeing a doctor and you're going and taking Suboxone and you're doing this step-down process, the longer you draw it out, the likelihood of you relapsing grows. And that the more pain you experience while sobering up, the higher the chances of you staying sober are. If you're watching this video, you've probably tried to sober up a dozen times before. And if you're trying to deal with sobering up for the first time and you're only taking a couple Percocets a day, or and you haven't been to jail a dozen times, and you seem to think that this is just a small stepping stone in your life, something that you can get over relatively easily, this isn't the video for you. When you are prescribed hydrocodone, hydromorphone, Oxycontin, Percocet, Dilaudid, doctors in this town will also prescribe you with nerve blockers like Lyrica, Neurontin, Gabapentin. And a doctor won't tell you that when you're prescribed a powerful opiate, a monthly opioid treatment, that they'll prescribe these other drugs along with you. One, because it eases the symptoms of withdrawal, but it also makes it more difficult for this medication to grab a foothold of you. And because that, like Lyrica, Neurontin, Gabapentin, all these drugs, these nerve blockers, and they're kind of like anti-inflammatories on steroids. They dull the euphoric sensation of being on an opioid, so a lot of people disregard them. I have tried to sober up 1,000,000 times in my life, and I was never successful. I don't have the ability. As an individual, I have an Ivy League education. I impress myself at how intelligent I am sometimes, and I know I don't take responsibility for that. That's totally my parents. But despite having the head on my shoulders that I have, I just wasn't even remotely able to sober up on myself. See, I was in and out of legal troubles, and I got in a fight with a girl, and she hit me with her car. It ruptured 2 vertebrae in my back, so that kicked me out of my drug habit. And while I was in bed, unable to walk, the doctors had prescribed me with Neurontin. And I noticed that as I'm withdrawing in my bed with a broken back, that I was like, something ain't right here, because, I should be pissing and shitting myself right now. I should be rolling, I should be writhing in pain right now. And for some reason, I'm withdrawing off this medication relatively easily. And the only thing I could account that to would be the fact that I was taking this Neurontin, this gabapentin. So I started doing research, and I found out that this gabapentin is, people are using this all over the world to help them with withdrawal symptoms. So people want an easy home remedy for opioid withdrawal. I'm going to be the bearer of bad news that there's no easy way out. But just know that the more experience or more pain you experience during this process, the better chance you have of staying clean. And that gabapentin, Neurontin, and Lyrica is very expensive, so I wouldn't, Lyrica was costing me $700 or $800 a month, and you can become dependent on it. But the common street remedies for opioid withdrawal are people are stealing like big family-sized bottles of Imodium. Imodium is an agonist. If you take Imodium, it will ease the symptoms of opioid withdrawal. But just remember that Imodium has a 72-hour half-life. Hydrocodone and Dilaudid or hydromorphone, these drugs have a very short half-life, like 4, 6, 8 hours at the most. So if you are using Imodium, which has a 72-hour half-life, and you're taking 40 or 80 pills, like bottles of Imodium, anything with that kind of half-life is going to make your life miserable. It's going to be a completely miserable process. And if you're trying to take Imodium or an opiate to get off of opiates, well, good luck. But street remedies are gabapentin, Neurontin, Lyrica, Imodium, Xanax, their blood pressure medication. They're trying to give people Klonidine. Not Klonopin, Klonidine, which is kind of like a blood thinner. But you should be cautious when you're taking Imodium, because taking huge doses of Imodium, one, can seriously screw your bowels up. That's kind of, a given. You kind of guess that. You would never shit again if you started taking bottles of Imodium. But I just noticed that most doctors that prescribed you opioids will also prescribe people these nerve blockers, and that these nerve blockers work hand in hand with these opiates to prevent these medications from grabbing a real strong foothold on you. But I noticed that when I was laid up in bed with this back injury, although I was seriously miserable, and I'm not talking about the actual back injury itself, I'm talking about the withdrawals from pain medication that I had experienced so many times before in the past, that for some reason taking large doses of gabapentin or Neurontin helped. I was still completely miserable. It just wasn't nearly as bad as doing it on my own. But I noticed that when I was trying to sober up a decade ago, when I was taking Suboxone or Subutex, that, it drops you in the middle of a field. You start looking around at what a loser you are. And unless you're in an aggressive counseling program, I can't see Suboxone or Subutex working. It is Subutex and Suboxone is a maintenance drug. That is something like Subutex and Suboxone is something you take to stop you from getting sick until the next time you take something that makes you more euphoric. And that it's a trap. I mean, what's the point of going to it? I don't understand. Maybe it'll help for some other people, but it sure as hell didn't help for me. If anything, it just prolonged this whole process. And I'm sorry to tell people that there is no easy out. I wish I could tell you, like, this is how you do it with little or no pain, or this is like, that you can snap your fingers and that everything will turn around and you'll wake up tomorrow and be able to lead a normal life. Well, sobriety is incremental. There's no one thing you have to do. There's no, like, well, all I have to do is not take medication for a couple days, and your bills will get paid, and you'll get good housing, and you'll get a great job. It's because I noticed that when I was under drugs, I seemed to have the impression that all the goals I was trying to achieve were based off of one thing. And as I stated in videos before, that this is something that happens from in your brain from being addicted to drugs. That as you sober up, you start to realize that achieving goals in sobriety, it's a broad spectrum of things you have to do, and that it's not one thing you have to do. Like, there's a lot more to being sober in life, or trying to sober up in life, than just not taking drugs. And I wish I could tell you that there was an easy way out, but just know if you're sitting there and you're in a lot of pain because of withdrawal, that the more pain you're in now, and as difficult as it may seem, that the more pain you experience now, the better chance you have of staying sober. And that there's that initial hump. And while you're going up that first hump, everything seems impossible. All these goals seem to be unobtainable. Sobriety seems to be unobtainable. But when you're on that downward slope, the fog will clear. And it took about 9 months to a year for the fog to clear. And then you start to feel silly. You start to realize that that like all this manic depression and energy and pain you were going through was it's mental. Because looking back after being sober for 2.5, 3 years, some of the things I was telling myself while I was in withdrawal was just absolutely psychotic. That I was telling, like, you think that you're going to be miserable forever, and that you're going to feel this way forever, and that you'll never be happy, and you'll always be in pain. Like, these things are just your mind trying to get you high again. And that the longer you're sober, the less pain, the more joy you'll have in your life. And these things, these goals that you set for sobriety and getting your shit back in order, become easier and easier and easier. And no one ever told me while I'm sobering up, like, hey, like, these goals that seem so impossible on the other side of this initial hump, they're not as difficult as your mind tells you that they're going to be. So remedies for home, avoid doctors that want to get you on a long-term Suboxone or Subutex treatment, because the doctor giving me Suboxone or Subutex actually set me back about a decade. And that breaking my back and being put on gabapentin, taking Neurontin, and strangely helped me. And I mean, whatever it takes to get you sober, whatever you think, if you have to go to church, if you have to go to NA, I mean, shit, if you have to slap a cop and get yourself locked up for 6 weeks, do what you have to do. But just know that initial pain that you go through, the more pain you're in, the better chance you have. And I wish I could tell you that there was an easy out, but there's not, There's just not an easy out. And I hope that you get the help you need, because I'm lucky enough to be having this conversation and make this video. I'm lucky enough to be alive, because if anybody should be dead, it should be me. And that I'm using this opportunity each day I have to hopefully get this information into one person's head that can actually use it. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment. I'll do my best to get you through your rough patch. Good luck, guys.